So we're going to pick up this conversation when Jack Tame is asking Christopher Luxon about how are they going to sell $20 billion in property. Now, Jack, to be honest, uses a couple of silly examples here. He's like, oh, it'll be 3 Ponsonbys you have to sell. All that's kind of nonsense, to be really fair. But the question still is, how on earth are you going to sell $20 billion worth of property, Mr. Luxon, to get this tax that you're claiming you're going to get? Let's pick up the conversation.
So we talked about values in the first part. I want to talk about credibility in the second part. You have constantly sold your party as the party of economic credibility, and your central policy for the cost of living crisis is a $16 billion tax cut. Now, to pay for those tax cuts, you've got to sell $20 billion in property, right? $20,000 million of property. Now, just to put that in perspective.
So it's $5 billion a year to get the tax cuts.
I cross-checked One Roof data with Stats NZ data last night. You've got to sell 3.5 Ponsonbys.
It's a silly example.
To get to $20 billion, you need to take the GDP of Fiji, Samoa and Tonga and double it. So
Again,
how are you going to do
example.
that?
Well, Jack, I can tell you, I can't.
Look, and let me just also say, I enjoy Jack Tame. He's spot on with a lot of this, but he's actually missed a really important point. It's not that the national government needs $20 billion worth of house sales. It's that they need $20 billion worth of house sales to international buyers that they're able to tax. That's slightly different, yeah? You see the difference? It's not just $20 billion. It's $20 billion to international buyers who will pay the tax. Now, we'll probably find out in more detail tomorrow, but we're already understanding that that tax doesn't apply to buyers from Australia, the UK, USA, Mexico, Canada, China, Japan, India. So you have to sell $20 billion worth of property to foreign buyers not from those countries. So that's actually what the question is, not just $20 billion worth of property.
Quite follow your numbers, but what I'd say to you is there's no doubt about it. When you take away all the noise in the selection, everything comes down to the economy. It's the number one issue that Kiwis are concerned about.
So how will you pay for those?
Well, I've been.
How will you sell $20 billion worth of property?
Let's take a step forward, back. I mean, what we're saying is, in government, we've got to do things.
We've only got limited time. Explain to me, how exactly will you sell $20 billion worth of property over 4 years?
What I'm saying to you is we're going to deliver New Zealanders tax relief. We're going to deliver low and middle income.
I'm sorry. How will you sell?
I disagree with your numbers. I'm not debating your numbers.
$20 billion?
No, I'm saying to you very clearly that we're going to make sure we deliver working New Zealanders income tax relief. The way in which we will do that is reprioritise spending.
No, I'm sorry. These are really simple.
Okay, so this is what we're getting from the National Party at the moment. It's a lot of trust me, trust me, trust me. Because Jack's right, it is a very simple question. What are you going to do in government to give us a society where $20 billion worth of property over 4 years will be sold to these people who are going to pay tax on it? And he hasn't answered it, and he won't answer it, and he keeps saying what the New Zealanders have to know is his tax cuts are coming. So what he's saying, he's either saying, fuck you, I'm not going to tell you, or he's saying, trust us, we know what we're doing. Neither of those answers are okay.
Questions, and this is your central policy. This is the policy that speaks to your economic credibility. As per your policy, you have to sell $20 billion worth of property over 4 years, right?
And Jack, yes. I am really comfortable with our policy. As you've had Nicola on last week, and we've talked about it, we've released all our information in our...
I'm really comfortable is just trust me. That's what that means.
Modelling.
You've released it all?
We've released these,
have you released your modelling?
32 pages of actually our
I'm sorry. Have you
released
no. Will you commit?
We've released lawyer advice.
Will you commit to releasing your specific modelling that shows how you will sell $20 billion worth of property to foreigners?
We have released a 30-page document with all...
You haven't released that modelling.
We have released our reviewers report.
You haven't released that modelling.
Through all our assumptions. I'm very comfortable with that. And we've released even legal advice.
So in the interest of credibility, does the public not deserve to see that modelling?
And Jack, what I'd also say to you is since we've made that...
So, doesn't answer the question, doesn't answer the question, doesn't answer the question. And remember, this is the opposition who have been screaming bloody murder at a Labour government about their... about showing their workings, about being transparent. And it's a very simple question to go, you can clear this up today by releasing all of the modelling. Why won't they release the modelling? I'm actually a bit perplexed about that. I'd be happy to get some of your answers in the chat. Why aren't they releasing the modelling? They've released like 30 pages of the modelling, but why won't they release all of the modelling? Is it because they're sticking by we don't need to, or is it because there's some pretty big freaking holes in that modelling that they don't want people to see?
Those announcements, there's been a number of experts and advisors that have come out into the public domain and said, look, this is great.
If you are so confident with your numbers, will you commit to releasing that specific modelling?
I am extremely confident with our numbers. We have worked
Great.
for months.
So will you
We've
commit?
got great
Will you
reviewers,
commit?
great advisors.
Will you
and,
commit to
and-
releasing that specific modelling? That is the question. It's a very simple question. Will you commit to releasing the specific modelling that shows how you will sell $20 billion worth of property to foreigners over the next 4 years?
Not just
And
foreigners.
Jack, we have released already our 32-page document.
You want to be Prime Minister. You want to be Prime Minister.
This
This is.
advisors and consultants have given that advice.
Everyone watching this can see what you're doing, can see that you are going, just ducking. Every time I ask you, it's a yes or no. Will you commit to releasing that modelling?
We've already released the information we're going to release, Jack.
So no.
Yeah, that's
in other words, so no.
We've released what we're going to release.
Okay.
What's important that the New Zealanders watching the show is what they need to know is that low and middle income workers are going to get tax relief. The plan is fully funded. We have had it reviewed.
But we won't show you.
But you are not releasing that modelling, and this all
don't
comes
need
down
to.
to
I don't
economic
need to.
credibility.
No, it doesn't.
What are you afraid of?
I'm not afraid of anything.
Then great,
I'm
then release
delivering
the
a
modelling.
fantastic tax package for working New Zealanders, which is fantastic. It's brilliant.
So one issue is the numbers, and
No, there is no issue on the numbers.
well, by all means, release the modelling.
By
By all means, release the modelling. You could clear this up in a heartbeat. We wouldn't have to agonise over
And we
this. You could
have
clear it up in a heartbeat,
I'd encourage everyone, jump on, look at the 32-page
and you will not find the modelling on that. Okay.
There you go. Good interview by Jack. Like I said, no criticism, but if we're being really correct, it's not that the $20 billion has to be sold. It's $20 billion to countries that aren't in tax treaties with us, which means all those countries I listed before, and I'm doing this off the top of my head, excuse me, but Australia, China, Japan, India, UK, USA, Canada, Mexico, they're not part of it because of the tax treaties. We're going to get to the next part of this conversation shortly, where actually a former Prime Minister that actually has quite a similar background to Mr. Luxon actually explains why it's not possible, which is a bit embarrassing, I think, for the incumbent leader of the National Party. Why won't they release their modelling? Raywin says because they haven't got any. Sam says it's such a red flag that he's being so coy. Yeah, it's interesting. It's like if you, I don't know how many of your parents out there, but if you're a parent and your child won't answer the question, you're like, what are you hiding? What are you hiding? What makes this worse is he saw Nicholas screw up prior, so he should have been prepared. Yeah, I agree with that as well. It's like, I don't know who are training these guys. John Key was famous for saying, I'm comfortable with that. Doom says, because he thought it was literal modelling and he was waiting for the glue to dry. Felix says he's a classic CEO who only gets told what's going on but has no idea. Well, that's interesting. And JK says just because they screwed up and they forgot about the tax treaties. I wonder if that's a bit like Forgot About Dre. I wonder if someone could write a song, Forgot About Tax Treaties, to the rhythm or to the beat of Forgot About Dre. What do you call it? Forgot About Trey? ETs? I don't know. Just brainstorming, people. Just brainstorming. So this is a really interesting part of the conversation. And after we've played this bit, we're wrapping up for the night. In this part of the conversation, John Key explains to us, John Key from the past, explains to us how the tax treaties can actually be enacted, like how you can get around them. Because they figured out a way how you can get around what they were going to do, which was a stamp duty, which is the same as the tax. And they figured out a way you could get around them. The answer wasn't that crash hot for New Zealand citizens, though. So let's pick up this conversation when we're looking at John Key talking about, well, it's a conversation including John Key talking about when they tried to do a stamp duty, which is the same as what the National Party is trying to do with their taxes.
The next question is legality. So in 2016, John Key briefly considered taxing foreign buyers of New Zealand property with a stamp duty. And a stamp duty is extremely similar to the tax or fee that you are proposing. Now, he was asked at the time whether there were legal provisions that would exclude us from taxing Chinese buyers. And here's what John Key said at the time.
We don't have the right to put on, funnily enough, a stamp duty. And the reason for that is that stamp duty was, taken off the table, if you like, through the free trade agreements we had, not only with Australia and Japan, and it also includes Mexico.
Because of the free trade agreements.
Again, stamp duty very similar to the tax that you were proposing.
We couldn't do it.
Now, since then, New Zealand signed the 2019 tax treaty with China, which has the same provision, meaning that we couldn't put in the discriminatory clause. However, John Key got advice that there was one way around that discrimination issue in the double tax agreements. There was one way to tax foreign buyers. You have to apply the fee to all non-tax residents. The problem with that is that it includes New Zealand citizens. So here's
all non-tax residents. So, there's a tradition in New Zealand of going on the OE when you're 18, 19, 20, 21. You go away for 3, 4, 5 years, you become a non-taxed resident, right? So I don't know if it's still the same as it was in my era, but you go away for 3, 4, 5 years, you work in a pub, you holiday around Europe, you bring pounds back with you, and then you buy a house. So the only way around this, that's a terrible freeze frame, by the way, Mr. Luxon. Put that tongue away. People have picked up on it too. Sorry, I'll just put these up there. Luxon's face. So confused. The only way around it is to tax non-tax paying residents, i.e. when New Zealanders come back from their OE and they want to buy a house, then they have to be included as well. John Key will explain this.
That's what John Key said. A tax on non-residents would capture some New Zealand citizens as well as foreigners, as it would be applied on the basis of residency, not nationality.
There you go.
So to be 100% clear, and please give us a clear answer on this, do you have expert legal advice that explicitly says you can tax non-residents, including Chinese buyers?
I'm sorry to interrupt this. I'm going to go back because this could be your next Prime Minister. He's just been shown by good journalistic work a massive gap in his policy and plan from his predecessor who tried to do the same thing and found his way around it. I implore you to watch his response, and when we make this into a clip tomorrow, share it with everybody.
Nationality. So to be 100% clear, and please give us a clear answer on this, do you have expert legal advice that explicitly says you can tax non-residents, including Chinese buyers, whilst creating a carve-out for all New Zealand citizens?
Jack, I'm not going to get into this with you. I'm going to be really clear with you about why where we are. Because we're...
Jack, I'm not going to get into this with you. Jack, I'm not going to answer your very fair question based on policies that my predecessor tried and gave us the answers to. Jack, I'm not going to get into this with you.
For all New Zealand citizens.
Jack, I'm not going to get into this with you. I'm going to be really clear with you about why where we are. Because where we are is we're saying you're focusing on one aspect of our funding for our
This
tax
is
plan.
fundamental to the credibility of your central policy. You want to be Prime Minister.
You are fixating on foreign buyer ban that we're putting in place.
You need a foreign buyer ban to raise $740 million
a year
in order to fund the tax cuts that you were giving to New Zealand.
Fund the tax cuts?
Yes.
Remember, there's other bits to it. Which
$740 million. Now, let's make this clear, right? Luxon is pushing this aside, saying this is only a part of how we're going to fund it. It doesn't matter. This is a part of how you're going to fund it. This is $3 billion of your supposed $16 billion because it's $750 million a year over 4 years. So he can't say this is just a part of it because you know what? If Labour had a $3 billion hole in some of their plans, he would be shouting it from the rooftops. Right now, Jack's just gone, this is the only way it can work according to your predecessor. He said, well, this is not the only way we're going to service the tax break, the tax cuts. It's not the only way we're going to do it. It doesn't matter. It wouldn't matter if it was 500 million and not 3 billion. You have to actually explain how this is going to work. And he refuses to do it because you know why? He can't do it. I would bet dollars to donuts he's never heard that before. I would bet dollars to donuts that this is new news to Mr. Luxon. And that's why he's, quote, not going to get into it with you, Jack.
Here, I've just asked you really clearly, do you have expert legal advice that explicitly says you can tax non-residents, including Chinese buyers, whilst creating a carve-out for New Zealand citizens? Answer that question.
I appreciate there'll be a range of views about this topic.
Answer that question.
We have advisors and experts that have actually said that this is possible, and we are going to do that. You've had issues put up by the Labour Party around FTAs. It's not possible. Well, it is. You've had issues put up around tax treaties. It's not possible. It is. You've had issues put up and say that a ban's not possible to reinstate. Well, it actually is, to undo it. And that's what we're doing. So we've had the advice. I appreciate the advice is different from the people that you may be hearing from.
I'm not hearing from anyone. I'm listening to
John Key. The people that you're hearing from, those weirdos, John Key.
John Key, the former Prime Minister, whom I know you were so close with, so he had major concerns about what you are proposing.
Advice,
and I've asked you,
think we can find a way through it and deliver it with great certainty, so that every New Zealander, working New Zealander, gets a tax relief and tax break, and that's what's important.
What does it say about the credibility of the so-called economic managers
Bingo.
that you will not release tax advice that says what you are proposing is legal and possible, and you will not release the modelling around your
we
numbers.
have released a 30-page document about how this policy works.
But
we
it doesn't have
released
that
Our
information.
reviewer's advice has gone through all of our assumptions, and we have released legal advice as well. There have been subsequently a range of experts and people in the public domain, whether it's been people who've been previously on the tax working group, whether it's been people like Charles Finney who've done a lot of FTA agreements, and they're saying it's possible. So,
I've asked you if you have that. I've asked you
confidence that we are going to do it. We're going to get it done. And
so we just have to trust you. But you've got the advice.
Well,
we just have to
I don't
trust
know what
you.
more I can do.
Well, you can release the advice on both.
Oh my God, he is so bad at this. He is so, I wish Chewy was here. He is so bad at this. I don't know what else we can do. I don't know what else release the fucking modelling. He is so bad at this. He is so bad at this.
Whether it's been people who've been previously on the tax working group, whether it's been people like Charles Finney who've done a lot of FTA agreements, and they're saying it's possible. So,
I've asked you if you have that. I've asked you
confidence that we are going to do it. We're going to get it done. And
so we just have to trust you. But you've got the advice. But we just have to trust you.
I don't know what more I can do.
Well, you can release the advice on both of these fronts
as we can.
No, you haven't. No, you haven't.